Well, thank you very much, gents. It's great to be with you, and hopefully we'll have an enjoying hour. Let's kind of get started with some background. Well, the title of this workshop, Moving Teams Forward, because that's what we're trying to do. Whenever we work with teams, we want to move forward. We don't want to move sideways, right, guys? That's a question for the team. All right, the one thing I want you to walk away with today, this afternoon, is how to be self-aware. Self-aware about your communication style is half of the battle. Self-awareness gives you an edge however you're communicating, whether you're selling, whether you're marketing, whether you're recruiting, whether it's personal or whether it's professional. So I'm going to try to help you become more self-aware. So what is the reason I want you to become more self-aware? Because the self-awareness and change and stretching ourselves is a three-stage process. The first stage, and you can see I have a rectangle up here on the board. The first stage in the upper left-hand corner, and if you can't read it, you let me know, is we're unconscious, and bear with me with my spelling, with the gaps. We don't know what we don't know. All right? Something hits us in the heart or in the head, all right? Something here in the heart or the head that causes us to become self-aware. You know what I mean? The head is more the intellectual, the prefrontal cortex of our brain. The heart, when I use heart to mean our old reptilian brain and in our heart. So if we're going through a divorce, we gotta get hit by the heart, or in the heart. It takes something like this to help us to become self-aware. So the goal of this assessment, this profile, if you will, is to help you be more self-aware about how you communicate, how you behave, and how important it is to stretch in the direction of others. Any question? Otherwise, second part of the process is now we've become conscious of our gaps. We started with unconscious gaps here. We get hit in the heart or the head. The assessment hits us in the head. We become conscious of our gaps. We have two choices when we become conscious. So this is the audience participation part of it. What are the two choices? One is what I call red, and the other is green. So what's the red one in terms of the next step? The red one is nothing. No, I'm not going to do anything about what I've become conscious of. Are you with me? That doesn't help us improve our communication style or our behavior, how people observe us. But let's pretend, and I'm hoping that when you become conscious of your gaps, you'll say, yes, I'd like to do something about it. I'd like to be a better communicator. I'd like to be able to relate to my prospects more quickly. I'd like to be able to bond with them and develop rapport so that they will tell me the truth. That's really all we want. Then we can diagnose the challenge and we can prescribe a solution. Hopefully it's an oracle solution, of course. But if we don't get the truth from our prospects, it's pretty difficult to be able to be successful in the selling process. Let's say yes, on decide to do that, you hire a coach, or you join a group like an advisory board like Tom, or you perhaps go to therapy, whatever, and then you become consciously competent. Okay? Now what that means is we are competent, but we're thinking about it. So it's not yet natural with us. And if you ever, I'm sure all of you guys have played some form of sports, you know that there's such a thing called muscle memory. Well, there's also head memory. And so we're in this stage where we don't yet have muscle memory. But if we do this, if we practice, P again and again, then we get to this great spot where we want to be, which is unconsciously competent. Okay? Now whatever we do, we don't have to think about it in terms of our communication skills, etc. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I've had some experiences which actually caused me to go back here, and I had to start this cycle all over again. All right? I don't wish it on anyone, but I've had a couple of divorces, so you can imagine how I've been hitting the heart along the way. All right? I'm just trying to show you that self-awareness is the most important thing in terms of becoming more consciously competent, and then over a period of time with practice become unconsciously competent. Questions about? Any questions? Okay. All right. Next part of the process is to just give you the big picture. We're not going to go into the motivators tonight. I say tonight. It's after 6 o'clock here in the East Coast, 3 o'clock yours time. But what I want to do is, this is supposed to represent an iceberg, and this is supposed to be the water. And what I want to remind you is the tip of the iceberg above the water is about 1/8 of the iceberg. The lower part of the iceberg is about 7/8. Now the guys in the Titanic had a problem, obviously, because they couldn't see. Well, they didn't even see the 1/8. But what I wanted to share with you is that the disc portion, which is the first half of the profile, DISC, that's the acronym for that part of the profile, represents the 1/8 tip above the waterline. It's visible. It's impacted by the environment. In other words, like the tip of an iceberg, Arctic or Antarctic, if it's really hot, the tip of the iceberg might melt a little bit. If it's really cold and wintry, etc., then it'll freeze up a little bit more, okay? And in effect, then, it can change, if you will, as a result of the environment. The term I like to use in terms of humans is stretch ourselves. Stretch ourselves in the direction of others. We'll talk more about that later on. The lower 7/8 of this iceberg is the motivators. The motivators is the last half of your profile. It's what drives you. It goes back to your childhood and in terms of the beliefs and the things you've learned. It's not acted by the environment. It is what it is. It's not likely that you're going to change. Okay? It's all of this stuff down here. So what we see and observe is being driven by what's below the iceberg, by the motivators. So you'll observe communications with your clients or prospects, or say if you're recruiting, you're someone you're attempting to recruit, or some work you're doing for marketing. You'll observe the behavior and communication style of others, but you won't necessarily know what drives it. This is a bit more complex, and Tom and I decided we would save that for the next session that we work together. Questions about the iceberg and the analogy of the disc and the motivators? Any questions? Otherwise, by the way, if you haven't figured it out with Jim, he's going to move fast. So unless you ask questions, we're going to just keep moving. Okay, guys? All right. Now, you see, go ahead. You see here a triangle. Can you see it? Can you see? You can see the triangle. You see the word fix. Can you see the word fix? Okay. Now, I have to tell you a Navy story. I crossed the Pacific Ocean 7 times, about 8,000 miles each way, from California to the Philippines, to Vietnam, to Japan, etc., when I was in the Navy. Back in the day when we did not have GPS systems. The way we got across the ocean was we navigated the old-fashioned way with a sextant. Hundreds of years of sailors have crossed the ocean with a sextant, getting a sun line at noon and a star shot at night, and try to get drawings if you will, about a triangle with mathematics. So you go into the bridge after you've done your sextant work. Remember, the ship is rocking back and forth, so it's very much of an art. There is some science, obviously. You pull the books out. Back in those days, we didn't even have hand calculators. You do the calculations, and 3 hours later, you hope you actually knew where you were. You were lucky if you were within 5 miles of it. Okay? But later on, we had surface radar. We could see the island, whether it's going into Pearl Harbor or Midway or the Philippines, and then we would navigate in there with the surface radar. But it was very much more of an art versus science. What I want to be able to help you see is that the profile itself and getting a fix on someone is more of an art than it is a science. So let's talk a little bit about this. The first line I'd like to talk about is observations. Observations. We're all human. We are not consistent and we are not objective. So inconsistent and subjective. And what that means is, of course, that we're wrong sometimes. That's not a problem. Hopefully it's not a big problem. Okay? But what I'm trying to help you see is it's just as important as anything you read in the profile. So if you have a spouse or a significant other and you share your profile with her, and I recommend you do that, then it may well be they will observe some things with you that perhaps you haven't observed, and their observations are just as important. Your observations of yourself, those are just as important as anything in the profile. The second line is what I call metrics. In sales and marketing and recruiting, we have all sorts of metrics. For every step in the marketing and sales process, there's all sorts of metrics. You probably already have a bunch of them, key performance indicators, etc. I'm sure Tom and you will be talking about those if you haven't already. The challenge, of course, with metrics is we're trying to get to the question of performance. Isn't that why we have metrics? And we're trying to understand how we can improve in performance, not only of ourselves, but also the team, the relationship between marketing and sales, the relationship between recruiting someone who's a top performer as opposed to a mediocre performance. All of those things are about metrics. Once again, that is part of getting a fix on an individual or of a team. Using metrics, using our observations. Now, when we're hiring someone, and eventually I would imagine you all do well, you will grow your sales team. Someone might be recruiting for additional people. And that presents a real problem. I'm going to draw a gap here and show a bridge. So this is the water here. I'm going to show a bridge up here because you cannot believe, with all sorts of steps on it, you cannot believe what's in the resume. People are very good at embellishing the resume, right? You don't know whether you can believe that or not. So to the extent we can figure out what the success factors are and understand what it is we're expecting, and then ask behavioral-based questions to see if someone really understands that particular part of the selling process or marketing or whatever, we can increase the chances that somebody who is here now will be able to fulfill the other side of the bridge where we want them. We call that a success factor snapshot, and it's an important element. Think of it as a job description on steroids. Very specific about what are the skills that we want to see with someone. Finally, we have this third line, which is about the profile. There are assessments online for just about anything you want. Team assessments, individual assessments, etc. This particular instrument from a company called TTI in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been a distributor for them for 25 years. I've done 10,000 profiles over that 25 years, 2/3 of which have been sales or marketing related executives. There's two parts to the profile, as we've already identified. The DISC portion tells us how we behave and how we communicate. The motivator portion, which is that second half, tells us why we do what we do. Okay? Here's what I want you to take away. This getting a fix on yourself or your team is more of an art than a science. We need to look at this and triangulate using observations, metrics for performance, and the profile. Someplace in the middle is the real person. Questions about that? Okay, so I have the 3 S's here. S number 1 is about self-awareness. We've already talked about that. So we want to be self-aware, self-awareness. We want to stretch ourselves in the direction of others. And then we want to cut ourselves some slack. After all, this is not an exercise we're going through here called life. This is it. This is the only time. So let's cut ourselves some slack and not be so tough. Before we go there, before I go to the next one, and then we're going to open up some pages in your profile or your laptop, wherever you have them. In fact, I'll give you the pages now so you can be looking at them while I tell you this particular story about how all this, the psychology of this. So let's start by going to the wheel, which shows up on slightly different pages, but you'll find it as it looks like a big circle. I'll show you what it looks like. And it's usually on page 27, 28, 26. So this is what it looks like. Okay? It's called the Success Insight Wheel. All right? It's a circle with a dot and a star. So look for that. Make sure you can see that. The psychology for DISC, as well as the psychology for predictive index, which is another tool, and also the psychology for Myers-Briggs, comes from the same place, and that was a guy by the name of Hippocrates. Greek, which relates a little bit to the name of your company, Apollos, and Hippocrates learned this with his patients in the 300 BC. And that was, if he was able to develop rapport and bond with someone much more quickly, then when he asked them questions, they would open up and tell him the truth. And as a result of that, he could do a much better job of diagnosing the situation and prescribing a solution. I believe that's what we do hundreds of times every day. Whether it's driving or whether it's talking to a prospect on the phone or face-to-face or whatever, we are trying to get the truth. We're trying to find out what the other driver's doing on the highway. We're trying to find out what's going on with our prospects, with our clients, etc. And then if we get the truth from them, we're in a much better position to prescribe, to diagnose first, of course, and then prescribe a solution. So let's look at these pages. This page here, 27, it might be 26 or 28. Has everyone got that up? Say that again?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. Okay. So we're going to fill in some of the blanks here. You can see the wheel here. You notice the D means driver. D for driver, up in the upper right-hand corner. S for steady relator, in the lower left-hand corner. Influencer in the lower right-hand corner. Cautious thinker in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to give you some just everyday language so you begin to understand what is meant by the 4 major elements associated with communication style. So, driver is very focused on the mission. Relationships are secondary. And so I'm not saying they're not important, but they're very much secondary to the mission. So if we're on a mission, we will bust through the door to get that accomplished if we're a driver. We tend to be very focused. By the way, I say we because Jim, this Jim, okay, is a driver. Okay? We're going to find out there's some other drivers sitting around the table with you. Very focused. We also tend to move very fast. And in fact, usually if I'm moving so fast, that's what causes problems. Most of the mistakes I make is because I'm moving too fast. I talk fast, I move fast. Here's the challenge, and the reason it's in red is sometimes I am aggressive or assertive. In other words, that's also called anger. My lady can tell you how I feel. Something happened this morning when I was leaving at around 6 o'clock this morning, and she said, "Why are you mad?" Okay, I was doing something because I was on a mission. I was on a mission to get in the car to go to my first appointment. Okay, so she translated that as mad. I wasn't really mad, but that's the way she translated. That was her observation. Okay, so we move fast. Relationships are secondary. We're on a mission. We're focused. We tend to be naturally talkative. I want to look at the steady relator on the other side because someone who has a communication style as a steady relator is more likely to conflict with a driver because they're on the opposite side. So what do I mean by steady relator? First off, they are relationship oriented. It takes them a while to develop a relationship. Once they do that, however, they become very loyal and dependable. The result of that is they become great clients because they're not looking for the cheapest thing in town. They know that it takes a while to develop a relationship, and they will put up with service that might not be the greatest in the world because they value the relationship so much. We'll talk about that in just a second. So they tend to be very steady-paced, not fast, steady-paced, and they tend to be passively aggressive. Passively aggressive. Now, not everyone. I'm just saying that's a tendency. And by the way, in the extreme, passive aggressiveness is not very good, and in the extreme, open aggressiveness is not very good. Okay, we all have seen and observed people with some of those tendencies. I certainly have observed myself. If we're talking to a prospect that is currently has a relationship with a competitor, and this person is a steady relator, you have an uphill battle because they value the relationship, and yes, you might have a better solution and can do much more for them, but they know the cost of moving from one relationship to another is very high, and they don't like to pay that price. Does that make sense to you? I'm going to give you a little sales extra credit along the way. So my favorite question when I'm, quote, selling someone who's a steady relator is something like this. "Hey, Charlie, you've been working with ABC for a long time now. I can't imagine any circumstance that would cause you to switch to someone else." Charlie, you've been working with someone else. I can't imagine. What I'm listening for is if they say no, no, no. Because a no to a negative question, I can't imagine, is a yes. So I need to find out very quickly, if you will, as soon as I can, whether or not they're open. So if they say no, 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 I might ask them, well, help me out. What would cause you to consider another vendor, another partner in the software applications that you're using? That is a way to help them open up to tell you, because when you ask that question, I can't imagine a circumstance that would cause you to change vendors. If they say, yes, you're probably right, I wouldn't change. Well, now you know you got an uphill battle. I'm not going to give up then, but I'd like to know how important that relationship is. Are you with me? Over here, these drivers, they need options. So if I'm proposing something to a driver, I'm going to want to make sure that they have options, because drivers want to be in control of the process. Control, control, control. Let's go over here to the lower quadrant and talk about influencers. Influencers tend to be people who want to have fun and they want to be liked. And you're going to see a number of the team around you has, or if you will, an influencer, or you could call it promoter. They needed a vowel, so they call it an influencer, because you can't have an acronym without a vowel, right? So, fun and be liked. They struggle with details. They usually have great verbal skills. They are usually poor listeners. Okay? Now, by the way, I just gave you some really two important points. And that is, they oftentimes, they being influencers, oftentimes don't want to complete the customer relationship management database and put all that stuff in there, because that's a bunch of details. Okay? And they rather talk than listen. And remember, they're salespeople. And of course, Sales 101 is ask questions and shut your mouth and listen, right? Okay? So it's a challenge, particularly for these people. Consequences is their real issue. They don't see problems. They don't see the consequences of their actions or lack of actions. We love them. They're wonderful to be around. They're fun. They want to be liked. But hey, they've got some challenges. All right? So they're going to tend to bounce around in their thought process and not always be consistent in a process, like, for example, the steps you have for qualifying a prospect. Cautious thinker, they're blue, of course. These are folks who want to cross the T's and dot the I's. They're very detailed, as opposed to the influencers. They're very detailed. Their goal in life is to be right. These folks up here tend to be engineers. They tend to be accountants. They tend to be programmers. They tend to be people who are reactive as opposed to proactive, and they're most likely to conflict with the person on the opposite side. Now you might ask the question, what about the dot and the star, Jim? The dot is your natural communication style. We're going to dig into that a little bit more in just a second. It's your natural communication style. And the star is adapted in the workplace. So there's some minor changes that might unconsciously take place in the workplace. I'm going to give you a little extra credit toward the end of our workshop about how you can figure out someone's communication style without giving them a profile. So I want you to go back 2 pages, and the 2 pages I want you to go back to takes us back to the vertical graphs. Okay? All right, and the vertical graphs comes into, hopefully, draw it down here. I can do that. Okay, Jim, we can do this. Here we go. So go back 2 pages. It looks like this. It's D-I-S-C at the top. Okay, D-I-S-C. The reason I like to go to this page is I want you to see that even though your dot or star may be in one of the quadrants, that all 4 of those are your perceptions of yourself. Remember, in answering these questions, you were asked your thoughts about each of the questions. This is your perception of yourself. This is not a test. There's no right or wrong answer here. But let's talk a little bit about these graphs. The one on the right is the natural. That gets to the dot on the wheel. You will, the mask that we subconsciously put on in the workplace, and that's the star. Okay? That each of the bars are colored. So we'll do Jim here, and that is Jim has got a high red that's above the midline in both of these. I'm not too different on either one. So what that suggests is above the midline that I'm very focused on problems. I want the facts. What that means is I'm going to see problems everywhere. I like to think for my clients that that's a value add because it helps them to uncover problems that they may not be seeing. But you may not be a high red, okay? You may be a little bit below the midline. I'm above the midline. The next one is the yellow line associated with, so that's about problems. I'm going to write that down, problems. The I is about people, all right? And I have to use black because it's a yellow easel pad. So I'm a little bit above the midline with regard to people. So I enjoy being around people. I enjoy chatting with them, having conversations with them, learning more about their business, that sort of thing. My steady relator line, which is this is about pace. The green is about pace, is a very short line, well below the midline. That means I'm fast. Above the midline, I'm slower. Below the midline, I'm fast. All right, and the last one is the blue line, which is the cautious thinking, which is about policies and procedures. So policies, it's really about risk. And I'm below the midline, but above the pace, above the green. That's what Jim looks like. All right, remember it's not right or wrong. But let me show you, I know some of you have a similar relationship, if you will, between these three, particularly because of the pace. I'm very fast, but yet I want to be right. Listen to what I said. Fast and I want to be right. Now that's tough. I can be fast and a lot of times be right, but I can also be wrong pretty easily when I'm moving too fast. So this causes a conflict. Okay? Because I'm moving so fast, I don't understand why other people can't do the same. Why they can't move as fast as I can. Okay? So it causes conflict. If I'm out on the road and I'm talking to the administrative people inside or sending them emails, etc., I don't know why they're taking 3 days to respond to me. Or even 3 hours. Because, hey, I'm out here with the prospects in the field doing my stuff, etc., etc. Okay? Anyone else beside myself have something like this where your green bar is well below your blue bar on either the natural or the adapted? Anyone's got one of those?
Yeah, you was raising your hand. Yeah.
Okay, bunch of you raising your hands. Okay, in fact, I'm looking at Tom because I know Tom's got something similar. I got Tom's profile in front of me. So, conflict. So I want you to be, remember this is self-awareness. I want you to be self-aware that while you can do many, many things at a very fast pace and be very accurate, a lot of people can't do that. So we need to cut a little slack with some of the other folks once we have figured out a little bit about what their profile is. I mean, you may not have a profile for any one of your other associates in other parts of Apollos, but you would have, hopefully when we finish, you're going to have a better knowledge about how to determine what someone's likely communication style is, even if you're just talking to them on the telephone the first time. Okay? Questions about that? All right, let's go back a couple of more pages. And I'm looking at, I've got Tom's profile in my hand here. I'm looking at 22, 23, and 24. Or it might be 21, 22, and 23. Or it might be 20, 21, and 22. It's called behavioral hierarchy. It has a series of 4 bars, blue bars, with red underneath them in 3 different pages. So let's look at that. That's called behavioral hierarchy. I want to explain the blue bar and the red bar. You'll notice that each of these are different. The hierarchy is your individualized hierarchy with regard to the behavior factors that your profile results showed. So no one's is going to be the same. There's always going to be some difference. So number 1 might be, I'll give you Tom's, is organized workplace. Okay? So Tom's got an organized workplace that looks like this. The blue bar is Tom, and by the way, there's 2 bars. The top bar is natural, the lower bar is the adapted workplace. So the blue bar is what Tom perceives of himself The red bar is the bell curve, the center of the bell curve. It looks to me like it's 5.1 is what the mean is. So the center of the bell curve is 68% of the people who have completed, the hundreds of thousands that have completed this profile, were in this center of this bell curve. Upper 16th percentile here, lower 16th percentile here, 68% here. That's what the red bar means. That's why I wanted to explain it. Okay? If you'll look at your first page, I happen to have 22 as the first of his 1 through 4 behavioral hierarchy. In every instance with Tom, he's either at or above the right edge of the red bar, except in actually in his adapted communication style. But those are his number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 behavioral hierarchy. If you would flip the page to the next set of pages, and Tom shows this, he's moving from here down to more the midline, the mean, if you will, with regard to his behavior, persistence, following policy, consistent, frequent change, and then flip to the third page, and now we're looking at versatile, customer-oriented, interaction, and people-oriented. And then, so Tom moves back into the lower 16th percentile with some of these in the last page. This is your perception of yourself versus the hundreds of thousands who've perceived perhaps in a different way. What I wanted you to understand is this shows your behavior hierarchy as compared to the hundreds of thousands who've taken the instrument. So take a look at that. You may disagree, and you have a right to disagree, and your observations might be different, or the observations of your team might be different. Okay? One more page, and then we're going to get to the aggregate. So stick with me. This next page I'd like to go over, if there are no questions about the hierarchy. Any questions? Okay. Is the page that's called Areas for Improvement. And don't play a joke on me and tell me you can't find that page. That's meant to be funny, by the way. Okay? That would be page 21. 20, 21, 22.
Got it.
Okay, areas for improvement. So, Jim's got one, right? Even Jim's got one. All right, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to do a little exercise. I'll be quiet for a couple of minutes, which is difficult for Jim to do. But what I want you to do is to read each of these. There might be 6 or 7 of them. And this is based upon your DOT, your natural communication style. Not the star, which is what we would observe in the workplace. So be aware of that. This is very customized to your communication style. What I want you to do in this exercise is to underline anything you disagree with or you don't understand, and we'll go around the table and we'll see if we can help you understand, and we can decide whether or not we ought to throw that out, because you're the best editor-in-chief of this profile. So take a minute, read the 5 or 6, whatever it is, 7 maybe, statements of areas for improvement, and ask yourself, do you disagree with that or you don't understand it? And then I'll answer your questions in just a minute. Okay, let's start with Tom as our leader, and because I know Tom, is there anything that you question or don't understand or disagree with?
Sure.
Pick one.
Yep, I'll go with be impulsive to seek change for change's sake. Make change priorities daily.
Okay. Now, I understand from talking with you, Tom, that the team is relatively newly formed, and this may be one of the first team meetings you've ever had. Is that generally correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So they've not had much of a time to observe you.
Well, not much. 2 months. We have weekly calls.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good. Okay. I missed that. All right. Has anyone ever told you, could be your spouse, could be your associates in earlier responsibilities in other businesses that you had, that you make decisions very fast and almost impulsive?
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
Okay. Or are you guilty like I am Don't be like me, but it's just something I've observed about myself, where I'll say something and then I'll find a way to pull it back. Okay. All right. So we have to be careful. We want to be self-aware of that. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the group setting when we look at the total team and how we can maybe get some help from others around the table so that we are not changing priorities just for the sake of change, because we love change. Okay. Now, is someone else? I can't see you, of course. But is there someone else who has either something they disagree with or they don't understand? So pick one of those. If so, tell me your name and then we'll look at it.
Hey, Jim, this is Nita here. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, I can hear you. Very nice.
Okay. This is a very nicely summed up summary of me. I agree to maybe 99% of it, or maybe 90% of it, but I think one of the things that is that be overly enthusiastic about our shortcomings, weakness. I don't know if I agree with that. I always think I'm with myself and my shortcomings. So I feel like it's hard to know where my weaknesses are.
Okay.
I don't do enough about it. I agree, but I feel that that's an area that I feel I do know.
All right. So let's do this, Nitha, because I have the benefit of your wheel in front of me, so I know where you are. You are typically in that high I area, and this is about your natural communication style. But let's read that again, and let's get some feedback from your teammates and see what they say. What's their observations? Go ahead and read it again.
Oh, yeah. So, be overly enthusiastic about our shortcomings or weaknesses and the shortcomings of others.
Ah, okay. Overly enthusiastic about the shortcoming of others or potentially even yourself. So, team, have we observed any of that in Nitha, or is that something we should throw out?
They don't know me much, actually. So
Okay, all right. So,
fairly new.
all right, okay. So not good. It's not likely we're going to get good feedback from the group. So let's put a question mark there.
So, Tom goes,
Go.
Let me jump in. Anita, if you recall, we had a call with Cohen, and I gave you some positive, constructive feedback along these lines right after that call. That you were not, you're almost apologizing a little bit instead of confident.
Okay.
And you're relatively new to this team and this what we're trying to sell, and you openly admit that. I give you credit for it, but sometimes I think you could be a little less tough on yourself.
Okay, good observation. So my advice, Nitha, would be self-aware. Test that yourself. Remember, you're the best editor-in-chief of the profile, and you want to be able to not focus too much on your own shortcomings. It's okay to kind of kid about ourselves. So I've already given you some Jim stuff where I've kind of acknowledged various things myself, but they've had nothing to do with my professional. They've had to do with fun things. I try to treat it like fun things. It's just Jim. Okay, so are you open to that? At least we'll put a question mark by it, and let's be real self-aware about it, and say the next month. And the next time we meet, I think we'll be talking about the motivators. It'll probably be a month or so from now, and we can find out more from you at that point.
sure, love to meet you, Jim.
Okay, great. Anyone else who's got something that they see in the areas for improvement that they disagree with or don't understand? Remember to identify yourself. And this is which one? Vivek?
This is Vivek, yeah.
Yeah, Vivek. Okay, I've got you.
I didn't understand one point which says under instruct and over delegate. Relax personality as opposed to discipline approach to follow.
I got it. Okay. So We will talk about your influencing style, which is in that lower right-hand corner, the yellow, if you will, okay? And there's a tendency of influencers, if you will, to bounce around and not focus so much on details, and more likely exhibit that behavior. So let's read it again, and we'll get some feedback from the group.
It says, under instruct and over delegate,
Uh-huh.
will rely on personality and the disciplined approach to follow.
Okay. So, do you understand that, or do you disagree? You don't think that's your behavior?
No, I didn't understand that.
You did.
Did not.
Oh, you did not. Oh, okay. So what that is saying to us is that that being liked by your prospect or others, your associates, etc., is very likely to be very important to you, and therefore you are influenced in such a way as to give them things, if you will, or delegate, etc., and not be so disciplined about following up or holding each other accountable, or even holding your client or your prospect accountable to what they said they would do.
More of a good cop than a bad cop?
There you go. That's a better description, Tom. Yes, that's a good cop versus a bad cop. So, Tom, you're probably more likely to be the bad cop, and Vivek's more likely to be the good cop. As a combination, you probably work pretty well together.
Work together.
All right?
Okay?
All right. Anyone else?
Do you agree or disagree with it? All right. Thank you, Jim.
All right, so now let's I think we'll go to the next picture here. So let's get to the group results. So this is the natural communication style under stress, and what I like to do is to look at these in terms of as a pizza pie. We don't want to buy a 2/3 of a pizza pie. We want a full pizza pie, right? So we want a full team that has diversity in their communication style, because then we benefit from different communication styles and, if you will, the way we view things. Now remember, this is the natural communication style. We're going to turn to the second page in just a second. So Tom, Nirmal, Gaurav, Young, Vivek, Nita, Esti, and then they're all on the right side, and then Nitin is very close to the right side, but over here more is a steady relator, okay? You notice, left to our own devices, there's no one in the C quadrant at all. So we've got, I'll just be literal, we've got in effect about 75% of a pizza pie. We don't have an analytical person. The team. By the way, that's not surprising. Here's the reason. Your team is essentially a sales and marketing team. And I've never found a top, I say never, I've done 10,000 of these, I think I said. 2/3 are sales or marketing people. Maybe I've had less than a handful in the 25 years that were ever cautious thinkers. There aren't too many marketing and sales guys and gals up in this quadrant. So if I'm looking at a sales team, this is what I would see. A whole bunch down here, 4 out of the 8 of you, including Tom, are as an influencer. That's almost always the case. The large majority is here. A whole bunch here in the driver, 3 of the 8, and Nitin is over here, steady relator. I couldn't tell you how many sales teams I've seen that look exactly like this. Okay? Nothing wrong with that, except that we're not crossing the T's and dotting the I's. The team might be moving so fast, and there's a tendency to be over here in this direction, that we may miss some situations because we haven't taken the time to analyze situations. Okay, let's look at the work environment. There's slight changes, but not a lot of changes. The most significant change is that Gaurav moves from an I over to the steady relator. Notice Tom and Nirmal are here. Esti, Vivek, Nita, and Jung are here. And Gorev and Nitin are over here. So Gorev was actually moving in this direction in the workplace. More of a relationship-oriented, I don't want this to sound derogatory, but more of someone, Nitin and Gorev, relationship. You'll take time. You look at opportunities as not so much transactional, but more about relationships. It may take you a while to kind of develop those relationships. So that's what we see over here. Tom and Nirmal are most likely as drivers. They're going to be very focused on the mission, very focused on whether or not this is a real prospect or a turkey, and very quickly try to decide whether they should invest more time and effort on that prospect, and pay a little less attention to the relationship side. These folks, Esti, Vivek, Nitha, and Jung, are going to be very good in their communications, very good in their communication style, have wonderful verbal skills, be very persuasive. But you might struggle with details. You might struggle not seeing problems. You might struggle, for example, in working with someone who's, let's say, an end user, who's really feeling the pain associated with their systems, but fail to get to the economic decision maker. Or those kinds of steps, simply because those are sometimes tough questions to ask, especially if we get a little off track of the sales process. So let's spend a little more time on this, because you may have some questions. Once again, we got to slice a quarter of the pizza that's not here. All that is saying is that we don't have an analyst. We're not taking the time to be analytical. So if we're talking about changes, okay, we need to put the pause button on for a little bit and say, okay guys, let's think of the downside. What's the risk associated with this? What's the worst case scenario, etc. Okay?
Jim?
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
What's missing here in our surveys is we don't have our solution architect survey.
Got it?
And actually by design, those folks are the ones that should be covering that quadrant more so.
Got it.
And my oversight, I had two of them in the room and three of them on call, and they were not surveyed.
Oh, okay. I see. I didn't realize this. So you're, what's the title? Did you have them?
Solution architect?
Oh, solution. Okay, solution engineers. Okay, I got it. Now those are my guess is when they take the profiles, and eventually we'll get to them, and we can integrate that in the next time we have a conversation. They're going to be the analytical folks. And we need them because then we have complete diversity, if you will. They're going to push the pause button for us and say, I hear what you guys are saying, but I don't know if you've thought about this. What about this? What if this?
We call them downers.
I love it. Yeah, they could they could come across as downers. They don't necessarily mean to. You guys don't mean to be a downer, because these guys are all enthusiastic. We got to charge forward, Tom and Nirmal. We got to charge forward. These folks are, oh, this is going to be fun. This will be great thing. And then, well, but have you thought about this? Are you with me? Okay. All right, but we're better off. The team is better off if we have a full pizza that we can be verbalizing when we're looking at various opportunities. And that's why the solution, because the solution engineer is going to say, this system that they have right now is really going to cause us a lot of problems. And it's really going to take a lot of difficult time in onboarding and training and getting these guys to use it effectively. So we've got to allow a lot of time for them to absorb this, because of this thing they got right now, which is killing them. We got to get rid of it, got to help them, but it's going to be tough. That's the kind of thing we want to hear from the cautious thinkers. Otherwise, we may miss that. Questions about this? I was a sales coach for about a decade before I became a Visage Chair 15 years ago. And so I'm going to give you a couple of things that I've learned along the way that hopefully will help you communicate not just with your clients or your prospects, but also with the personal people around you. If you haven't shown this to your spouse or your significant other, you should do this. 90% of the time, 99% of the time, tell you the truth, the spouse and the significant other says, yeah, that's you. Okay? They'll give it to you candidly, believe me. All right? So now, this is an exercise. It's a fun exercise. And to play this game, we need to have a quadrant. You'll notice I've drawn up here a quadrant. And so this is disc style without a profile. How can we tell somebody who's on the phone, maybe for the first time, or a prospect we're working with and we're in an interview with maybe 2 or 3 different people, and we're doing the discovery process. How can we figure out what their style is? Now, it's not going to be perfect, and we don't have to get both of the questions correct. We're simply looking for an edge. Here's the deal with communication. We're looking for an edge. Remember what Hippocrates taught us. Stretch ourselves in the direction of others. And by the way, I failed to mention, the more centered you are in the wheel, the more likely you are to be easy to stretch yourself in the direction of others. You're closer to others, and therefore it's easy. Being out on the outer edge, when I took this 25 years ago, I was on the outer edge of driver. Over the years, as I've taught it, learned it, worked it, trained, all those other sort of things, I'm about halfway into the center. So we can stretch ourselves, and that's what we want to be able to do. So play this with me, because I think we'll have some fun here. And that is, I'm going to give you some clues as to how you can figure someone's communication style and get at least half of it right. Half gives you an edge. Think of someone you want to communicate with more effectively. Maybe it's a professional as opposed to your significant other or whatever. If you're so new you don't have a client or a prospect, then use someone else. But let's do this together, and let's mark this on the x-axis this way. Over right-hand side of the x-axis, to east if you will, I'm writing down talk. Are they talkative? I'm going to put an X on the x-axis. I'm going to mark the X in just a few minutes. Over on the right-hand side, are they talkative? On the left-hand side, are they quiet? Now, the question is this. You can't have anybody in the middle. If you were to mark them, the person you want to communicate with more effectively, are they tend to be quiet or they tend to be talkative? I'm thinking of someone, I'll tell you who it is in a minute. I'm marking it here on the x-axis, pretty far out. He's a pretty talkative guy. So play along with me. Have someone that you'd like to communicate with more effectively, hopefully professional that you're working with. Are they talkative or quiet? Has everyone got that? Okay. Let's do the vertical. The vertical is, I'm asking myself about this same person, are they focused? Do they tend to focus for long periods of time? Do they tend to be organized in their thought process? So the guy calls up and says, hey, I got 3 things I want to talk to you about, A, B, and C. That tells you they're pretty organized, right? The other guy calls you up, or you ask him questions, and he or she is all over the place. I call them bouncers. So the south are the bouncers, the north are the focused and organized in their thought process. Okay? I'm going to mark an X down here south. This guy is a bouncer. And this is my son. He is a high I. My son, by the way, lives in Santa Monica. He has been a consultant for Accenture and another consulting firm for over 15 years, but he's now an account executive for Salesforce, so he's a sales guy. It's a fancy name for sales guy. All right? He's a high I. He bounces around. He's not consistent. He wants to have fun. He wants to be liked. He's a very likable guy. All right? Tends to be an I, communication style. Okay? Now, this is a great drill for you. If two of you or more know someone, you can compare notes about a client or a prospect with regard to what their communication style is. How could that help you? That could help you in terms of communicating with them. I can't give you my mouse pad because I can't transmit it online. I can transmit it online, but I can't physically give it to you because you guys are in California. I'm in Philadelphia. But I will put something online, Tom, that actually gives you some examples about how to talk to different communication styles. Okay? How to be more effective. But I need to be able to figure out what their communication style is. So I'll just give you a couple of thoughts. If I'm dealing with a high I, we got to have some fun along the way. Okay? I need to be likable. I need to bounce around with them. As a driver, that's tough because I've got a mission. I want to get right to the heart of the matter, and they want to bounce around. But if I don't let them bounce around, I'm not going to be able to develop the rapport with them that I want to. If I'm dealing with a driver, I want to be able to focus on the mission. I want to be able to get to the facts. I want to be able to give them options to make a decision. If I'm dealing with this steady relator over here, I want to be able to pause and take time to develop the relationship. They don't want to move too fast. I want to try to develop the relationship and understand that I may have to pull things out of them with questions because they may not be so proactive in communicating. If I'm dealing with this cautious thinker over here, then I know I've got to give them time to analyze. So I might ask him something like this. I'll give you a couple of more questions. The cautious thinker, I might say something like, hey, Bill, we've thrown a lot at you with this proposal and everything. And my concern is that maybe we haven't had time to cross the T's and dot the I's. So you may need some time to absorb this. So help me out. Is that something you need to be able to analyze this more in depth? Okay? That resonates with him. I've come up and basically said, okay, you may not be able to absorb this thing as quickly as I have or as I've presented it. What can we do? Do we need to take a pause and really take some time to analyze this? If I'm dealing with a steady relator, I might ask this question. This is one of my favorite questions with regard to a steady relator, and that is, I think I actually talked about this earlier, and that is, you've been working with ABC for a long time now. I can't imagine anything that would cause you to change that relationship. And what I'm looking for is a no, no. So my point is, we want to be able to stretch ourselves in the direction of others. I will send you some material that you can share with your teammates, Tom. That one's called a white paper that I've written called Two to Tango, and also the mouse pad, which gives you some good questions to ask. And maybe our next conversation in another month or so, we can go over some of that and see what you've done to reinforce these concepts. Question about this exercise. I'm going to put it to use now in a very important way. And this is called what I call cast of characters. So I know this is a little bit complex in what I've drawn here, but let's say I've got an account that I'm working on, and I imagine your business is a complex selling process. I'm fairly simple about what I mean by complex selling process. It means that 2 or more people are involved. And you'd say, that's pretty simple, Jim, because we usually have 4 or 5 decision makers. Okay, you got my point. And that is, I'd like to have my cast of characters, and I start by drawing an organizational diagram. So maybe this is the CIO here. Okay, I'm just imagining this is a CIO. And then you have some various leaders here. And maybe this is an end user over here. And maybe this is the CFO or accountant. So maybe this is the person who's an influencer in the decision. This CEO is the economic decision maker. And maybe this guy is involved with the implementation. I'm just making this up, obviously. I want to know two things. First thing I'd like to know is, well, in the first place, I know I need to have a champion. I'm not going to get any prospect to move forward to accept a proposal unless I have a champion, an internal champion. So I've got to find an internal champion. I'd like to know that, let's just say for the moment, the end user who's feeling the most pain, end users feel the pain. Let's say the end user is an I. Okay? And let's say that the implementation person is a C. And let's say we don't know the CFO yet. We don't know the CIO. Well, let's hope you know the CIO. But let's say this person is an S. Now, how did you figure that out? You used the technique I talked to you earlier about. You compared notes with your colleagues who've interacted with these people, and you've done your best guess as what their communication style is. So I've got a C that's blue. I got a steady relator that's green, and I got an I that's yellow. And if I know the CIO up here, he may be a driver for all I know. Maybe he's driving this whole thing. Okay, let's just say we know him, and we know he's a driver. We got different communication styles. This is going to be quite typical of any team you're working with. Different communication styles. Okay? But by comparing notes with each other, we got a better chance of understanding what their communication style is. And within a few moments of phone calls, within a few moments of face-to-face, and comparing notes with each other, you can probably figure out, even if you don't get it half right, what their communication style is. The second set of questions I want to ask is this. Is this person a white knight for us, for Oracle, a gray knight, or a black knight? So what's the difference? The white knight will say, hey, Oracle's got a great software. Yeah, they occasionally struggle a little bit with X, Y, Z. And Apollos has got a great reputation, and occasionally they struggle, but they always respond in a timely fashion, and they're good at fixing things. That's my white knight. The gray knight, he or she's not going to say anything. And the black knight's going to say, you know what, they mucked up. I talked to another user that they mucked up the system 5 years ago, and there's no way we're going to use these guys because they mucked up something 5 years ago. I'm exaggerating again, but once again, that's a black knight. If I know the communication style, and I know that I got a white knight, that's going to help me with my selling strategy. Let's just play the game. Let's say the end user is our white knight, and let's say the driver is a gray knight. Okay, and let's say the implementer is also a gray knight. Okay, so gray knight. Say this person, the chief end user, is a black. Let's play this out. It could be anything. I'm just making this up as I go along. Okay? Well, our goal has got to be, the strategy clearly is, we got to go to our white knight. We got to get their help to converting this black knight to a gray knight. We got to neutralize whoever that is. We hope to take the gray knight, turn that person into a white knight. We got two white knights here. We got to deal with this person. We got to figure out this person. We've never even met with them. We've heard about them. We need to talk to them. And then if we get two white knights here, and if we get at least we got a great chance of being able to turn the CIO gray knight into a white knight for us. You see how you can take two questions, their communication style, whether they're white, black, or gray knight, and help develop a strategy to deepen and broaden relationships with either an existing client, a key account client, an account which offers more opportunity if we go to other divisions, for example, and get introductions to others, or a prospect that we're working to try to solve problems that they've got currently with their current system.